So let's go through here, and we're going to walk through all of this, and this won't take very long. I'm going to try to go really, really fast with this. So the before parentheses thing is basically spacing before parentheses. I do not prefer this simply for the fact that I treat keywords that have parentheses next to them as functions. They should behave like functions, they should act like functions, and typically speaking, just like in math, I'm going to have the parentheses adjacent to the function name. So this kind of, for me, I don't include a space before parentheses. This is pretty normal for most people. But there are some cases in where the defaults, like in WebStorm, do actually add some spaces to that stuff. Now we've got spacing around assignment operators. This gets interesting. Assignment operators, well, in this case we're saying equals plus equals. I find having a space on either side is very important because it really signifies this is going to be set to this, and it makes it very clean to be able to see that there is a setting operation going on here. Logical operators, let's see, we want to actually have some space around that. Sorry, I clicked the checkbox, and you can see here this example. I believe that logical operators are very much a very grouping style operator. They group other logic together, and because of that, they also need some sort of separation to be able to visibly see the separation between the two. And you can see here, as I uncheck it, it gets a little convoluted when you can't see the spacing. So we've added that. Equality operators. Now this is interesting. I treat equality operators like this, much like I treat the multiplicative operators, because just like in algebra, they kind of group themselves together. They basically are they're the first thing to actually compute. And so in this case we know that I equals double equals j is actually ends up resulting in a Boolean. So I prefer to keep these kind of together as almost like a single statement, and it allows me to make a differentiation a lot easier against when you see the single equals. It's very easy to see that there's a space on either side, versus it's also even more distinct to see a double equals operation. And again, this is some very common mistakes that people make, is they accidentally make this a single equals, and then all of a sudden, their code is broken. So moving on. Other things, basically, again, very opinionated stuff from me, but I generally, will add spaces to these bitwise operators. Plus and minus, again, is because I do believe that the multiplicative are grouped together a little bit more than, say, the plus, and you'll see this very commonly in algebra, right? You'll put a 2a and then a plus this, and it seems to separate things out. I don't want to put spaces around urinary operators, because I really feel like they're very much tied to their variable. All right, so I'm going to close this, move on. Around brace, so I just pretty much blanketly around the across the board put spaces around braces. It just seems to be like a very clean way to go, and you'll see here wherever you see a keyword and then a brace. Before keyword, same thing. Now you can see here we've got spaces within brackets, things like that, pretty much all the way off. And you'll see that I have that here, like for the for, the beginnings and the ends of that stuff. So in ternary operators, you'll see, where are we here? Where's a good example of it? Yeah, I want to have some spacing, much like I have in an or an ampersand operator. I want to break these apart to be able to see that this is one block and this is another block and this is another block. We've got obvious stuff. I mean, I think most people have a space after a comma but not before, and in this case the assignment operator, after but not before. All right, spaces, done. Moving on. Wrapping and braces. So I've spent a lot of time tooling over this, and I did that way ahead of time, so we didn't have to sit here and watch me do it. But the key is again, readability. Readability under different conditions as well. Like sometimes you're going to have a function that is, as you'll see here, just a few letters, and it's very easy to see what's going on, and there's not that many parameters, and they're all, in this case, even short lettered parameters, and they're very easy to manage and very easy to read. But there are other cases where things get really long, like really big arrays, really big function calls with a lot of parameters. It just gets too long going right, off to the right, and it's just sometimes a lot easier to read the parameters in that way. Now, if we keep going and see like keep when formatting, line breaks, comment in first column, simple blocks, simple methods on one line. This is really just a nice thing that WebStorm provides. It says, hey, if it's like this, don't mess with it. And I really like that they offer that feature where if you're going to do formatting and someone makes a decision, like for example, I could take off this comment and first column thing, and then what you'll see is that it would always push it over to the right. But I think there's a reason for that. I think somebody may be making a debug-based comment, and I don't want to lose that intention there. So yeah, I'm not overriding that as a code style. Comments wrap at right margin. I looked at this as well, and we can come down here and you can see that some people are like, yeah, you need to wrap your stuff, but you know what? It's really bad to automatically force that. Let people style and be, show elegance through their own kind of writing of the code versus screwing with how they write their comments. There might be some really long paragraphs there that intentionally have a certain look to them, and if you try to override them, you're probably going to break something, at least in how it looks or reads. Braces placement. Okay, this gets really interesting. So in function declaration, next line if wrapped. Well, what's going on here? So what that means is if this function declaration parameters gets chopped, again, and you'll see cases where it's not chopped, like this is the non-chopped version, which reads very normal and clean straight across, but for a large set of parameters, it will decide to chop it down so that it doesn't get too long past this. You can see they're showing this fake margin, right margin parameter to demonstrate this. And then we want to be able to format and style that experience. So I've played with this a bunch, and again, it's still up for debate. I'd love to hear people's comments about this, but what I find is that because you're going to, obviously not everything's going to be ABCD, it's going to be like longer words, right? So it'll probably read and look nice. I actually played with having the parentheses be on the next line and leaving the comma missing, but I found that with their the requirement of at least one delimiter character after the parameter, you might as well have the last one be the parentheses in this case. And then also, a convention used in other languages is that the braces should start at the first line. I find this makes it much easier to read if you do it this way. Like, for example, if you can see here, this is very hard. I think this is hard to read because you missed where it started. It's like, wait, what's going on here? Versus this makes it like, oh, okay, this area up here, this area here is where all the attributes are, where where the parameters are, and this is where the code starts. So I find that very readable. I know this is probably getting long and boring, but I hope it's interesting to some people who really kind of would like to have a nice convention and can see the value in especially with using WebStorm at defining these rules. And so we're going to keep going. Function declaration parameters again, chop down if long. We kind of went over that. That's what this is about. Function call arguments. Shoot, I forgot. That's this one. This is an example of this. So when you actually call a function, if it's too long, then it will like basically wrap them. Now chopping these I think is too much, but wrapping it, hey, that's pretty cool. If you're gonna do it with some of them, you might as well do it with all of them. And then it seems I like that I can see where the function call starts and where it ends, and it only is gonna do this for the cases where that function is going to be long. So this is the conditional logic that says, yeah, this looks good. Again, all about look and elegance and being easy to read. This is obviously very easy to read. This is also very easy to read, at least in my opinion. So, if statement. I do not necessarily like to force braces on if statements if it's just a one-liner. And again, that's a decision that an individual coder can make. I don't believe that there's a winning opinion here. Some people just like braces around everything to be consistent, and sometimes it's hard for people to realize that, oh, that's actually a single line statement. But I think that's the failure of people making it clear. Like if you try to jumble too many ifs together, or lines together, and you don't indent right, you can lose it. So, but again, that's up to the person. I don't want to force braces, but in the case of for like else's and special ifs, you'll see here that I think that needs to go on a new line, and I do believe that this should be allowed. because it's another statement, an else if, which sure you could put another line, but I think that just makes it look worse. Now we get into for statements even. Interesting, I didn't even know this was a thing, but it's really cool that WebStorm will correctly chop them down, and then there's this notion of if you are chopping, use braces. I think this is very unreadable as is, so when multi-line, that's awesome. I think there's an example of, I'm trying to find the for loop that doesn't have that. Yeah, here's the for loop here that shows, hey, this is an inline one, and if they put another loop line or whatever, who cares? This I still think is very readable.